You know that feeling when you're in the middle of a routine task, something you've done 100 times before, and suddenly someone says something that stops you in your tracks? That's exactly what happened to me on that Tuesday afternoon. I was balanced on a rickety ladder, arms stretched toward a stubborn ceiling light, when Vivian looked up at me and said those words I can't forget. At 53, I don't care what people think anymore. Do you? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name's Alex, 31, an electrician by trade, but a dreamer, at heart. Not the successful kind with a thriving business and a fancy truck, just a regular guy with calloused hands and a toolbox that's seen better days. I've been running my one-person handyman service for 3 years now, taking whatever jobs come my way while quietly saving for my real passion, building custom lighting fixtures that blur the line between function and art. I live in Oak Ridge, one of those mid-sized towns that's neither charming enough to be a tourist spot nor large enough to disappear into. The kind of place where people still notice when you've painted your mailbox a different color, but pretend not to care about your business while collecting every detail to discuss later. Then there's Vivian Mercer. She moved to the neighborhood about a year ago, settling into that imposing Victorian house at the end of Maple Street, the one with the wraparound porch and stained glass windows that always made me wonder who'd live there. Most of us knew very little about her. Divorced, no kids, originally from somewhere back east. She didn't show up at community potlucks or join the neighborhood watch. She was polite when encountered but never lingered for small talk. What I did know was that she had impeccable taste. The few glimpses I'd caught of her home's interior revealed vintage furniture mixed with modern art pieces and lighting fixtures that made the electrician in me deeply curious. So when she called about a flickering dining room chandelier, I was more excited than I cared to admit. It's probably just a loose connection, I explained on the phone. Shouldn't take more than an hour. Perfect, she replied. I'll see you tomorrow at 3. When I arrived, Vivian answered the door dressed in paint-splattered overalls, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, looking nothing like the carefully put-together woman I'd occasionally spotted collecting her mail. You caught me in the middle of a project, she said, leading me through a hallway lined with striking black and white photographs. I'm converting the spare bedroom into a studio. The dining room was even more impressive than I'd imagined. High, ceilings with ornate molding, deep blue walls, and a massive wooden table that looked like it had hosted a century of family dinners. Above it hung the chandelier in question, a beautiful brass piece with delicate glass globes. That's a Hobart design, isn't it? I asked before I could stop myself. Vivian raised an eyebrow. It is. Not many handymen would recognize that. I shrugged, feeling my cheeks warm slightly. I have a thing for lighting. Always have. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. Then we'll get along just fine. Setting up my ladder under the chandelier, I got to work, checking connections and testing wires. Vivian didn't hover nervously like most clients. Instead, she sat at the table with a sketchbook, occasionally glancing up when I muttered to myself. So, Alex, she said after a few minutes of companionable silence, what made you choose this line of work? The question was standard small talk. But something in her tone made me give a real answer, instead of my usual script about enjoying working with my hands. My dad was an electrician, I said, focusing on the wire I was stripping. He taught me everything from how to wire a 3-way switch to how to deal with difficult clients. When he got sick 5 years ago, I took over his appointments. After he passed, I just kept going. But it's not what you really want to be doing, she observed. I looked down, surprised by her perception. What makes you say that? The way you looked at this chandelier when you walked in. That wasn't the look of someone who just fixes things. I hesitated, not used to being read so easily. I design lighting fixtures, or at least I try to. Haven't sold many yet. Do you have photos? Carefully balancing on the ladder, I pulled out my phone and handed it to her. Open to a gallery of my designs, industrial-inspired pendants, sculptural table lamps, and a few more experimental pieces that combine driftwood with copper wire. Vivian swiped through them slowly, her expression unreadable. After what felt like an eternity, she looked up. These are remarkable, Alex. Why are you still climbing ladders in other people's Dining rooms? The bluntness of her question caught me off guard. It's complicated. It always is, she replied, handing my phone back, but rarely as complicated as we make it. I returned to the chandelier, unscrewing the base to access the wiring inside. Not everyone can just follow their passion. Bills need paying. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. True, she conceded. But sometimes we use that as an excuse because we're afraid of failing at the thing we really care about. Her words hit uncomfortably close to home. I'd been telling myself for years that I was just being practical, building my savings before taking a risk on my designs. But 3 years had passed, and I was no closer to making the leap. Sounds like you're speaking from experience, I said, deflecting. Vivian leaned back in her chair, considering me for a moment. Did you know I used to be a corporate lawyer? 25 years in a Manhattan firm, specialized in mergers and acquisitions. This didn't match the artistic bohemian woman sitting before me at all. What happened? I woke up one morning, realized I was miserable, and quit. She said it so matter-of-factly that I almost laughed. Just like that? Just like that, she confirmed. Though the seeds had been planted years earlier. My husband, ex-husband, now, couldn't understand it. We'd built this perfectly respectable life together. Big apartment, summer home, the right friends, the right restaurants. Leaving all that behind seemed insane to him. What did you do after quitting? I asked, genuinely curious now. Moved to a small apartment, took photography classes, started developing film in my bathroom. Made every mistake possible. She laughed. My first gallery showing was a disaster. Hardly anyone came, and the few who did were mostly feeling sorry for me. But you kept going. I kept going, she nodded. And eventually, I got good enough that people started paying attention. Not fame or fortune, mind you, but enough recognition to make a modest living doing something that actually makes me feel alive. As she spoke, I noticed the photographs on the wall with new appreciation. These are yours, aren't they? They are, she confirmed. A series I did on urban isolation. I studied them more carefully, city scenes captured in stark contrast, each featuring a solitary figure surrounded by crowds or towering buildings. They were beautiful and melancholy, in equal measure. They're incredible, I said honestly. Thank you. She smiled. Then her expression turned thoughtful. The hardest part wasn't learning the craft, you know. It was letting go of what other people thought I should be doing with my life. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. My parents had been supportive of my creative interests, but the rest of my family saw my handyman work as a step down from my father's established electrical business. And my ex-girlfriend, Mia, had never hidden her disappointment that I wasn't more ambitious in traditional ways. How did you do it? I asked, turning back to the chandelier. Let go of others' expectations, I mean. Gradually, then suddenly, Vivian laughed. But I'll tell you when it really clicked. I was at a dinner party with old colleagues feeling like an imposter in a dress I'd bought for the occasion, when someone asked dismissively about my little photography hobby. Before I could answer, my friend Catherine, the only one who'd stood by me through everything, said, "Actually, Vivian's work was just featured in the new contemporary gallery." The look on their faces was priceless. Must have felt good, I said, smiling at the image. It did, she admitted. But what felt better was realizing I didn't need their approval anymore. That's when I knew I'd finally broken free. I'd located the problem with the chandelier, a loose connection at the junction box, and began reassembling everything. Almost done here. Already? Vivian looked disappointed. Well, would you like some tea before you go? I've been talking, your ear off, and I haven't even offered you a drink. The invitation surprised me. Clients usually wanted me in and out as quickly as possible, not lingering for tea, but something about Vivian's story had resonated deeply, and I found myself curious to learn more. Tea would be great, thanks. While Vivian disappeared into the kitchen, I finished with the chandelier, tested the switch, and packed up my tools. By the time she returned with a tray bearing a teapot and 2 mugs, I was admiring her bookshelves. An eclectic mix of photography books, legal texts, poetry collections, and what looked like travel journals. Earl Grey okay? she asked, setting the tray on a side table. Perfect. We settled into her living room, a cozy space with worn leather chairs and a bay window overlooking a garden that was as thoughtfully designed as the rest of her home. So, she said, handing me a steaming mug. Tell me about these lighting designs of yours. How did you get started? I explained how my interest had begun in my father's workshop, where I'd experiment with scraps of wire and old lamp parts. How I'd studied industrial design for 2 years before dropping out when my dad got sick. How I'd continued creating in my garage, ordering materials online and teaching myself techniques through trial and error. The problem is getting noticed, I admitted. I've tried a few local craft fairs, but my work doesn't really fit in with the candles and knitted scarves. And galleries. I trailed off, shaking my head. Galleries can be intimidating, Vivian nodded. Especially when you're just starting out. It's not just that, I said, deciding to be honest. I'm afraid they'll laugh me out of the building. These people have art degrees and connections. I'm just a handyman who makes lamps in his garage. Vivian set her tea down with a decisive click. That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps people from pursuing what they love. Do you think I wasn't terrified when I first approached a gallery? I was a middle-aged ex-lawyer with a portfolio of amateur photographs. But I did it anyway. And they took a chance on you. Actually, the first 3 rejected me outright, she corrected. The 4th suggested I take more classes and try again in a year. It was the 7th gallery that finally gave me wall space, and only because the owner's daughter had been one of my legal clients years before. I smiled at her candor. So it's all about connections after all. It's about persistence, she countered. And yes, sometimes a bit of luck. But mostly it's about believing your work deserves to be seen, even when no one else does yet. She stood and walked to a cabinet in the corner, returning with a business card that she handed to me. Julian Green, I read aloud. Green Light Gallery? He specializes in functional art, furniture, lighting, textiles, and he happens to be an old friend. If you put together a proper portfolio, I'd be happy to introduce you. I stared at the card, equal parts excited and terrified. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Vivian suggested. No pressure, just consider the possibility. I will, I promised, tucking the card carefully into my wallet. We talked for another hour, our conversation flowing easily between art, work, and life choices. I learned that Vivian had moved to Oak Ridge seeking quiet after decades in New York, that she'd chosen the Victorian because it reminded her of her grandmother's house, and that she was converting the spare bedroom into a darkroom for her film, photography. In turn, I told her about my father's workshop that I'd preserved almost exactly as he'd left it, about the lighting fixture competition I'd been too intimidated to enter 3 years running, and about my dream of eventually opening a small studio where I could both create and display my work. You know, Vivian said thoughtfully, I'm hosting a small gathering next weekend. Nothing fancy, just a few friends coming over for dinner. Some of them are artists and designers. Would you like to join us? The invitation caught me completely off guard. Me? I mean, I'd love to, but what? She challenged, a hint of amusement in her eyes. I gestured vaguely at myself. I'm not exactly part of the art crowd. And I wasn't either, until I decided to be, she countered. That's the secret no one tells you, Alex. These worlds we think are closed to us, sometimes all it takes is walking through the door when someone opens it. I found myself smiling at her persistence. When you put it that way, how can I refuse? Excellent, she said, looking genuinely pleased. Saturday at 7. Bring one of your lighting pieces, something small you can carry, and don't overthink it. As I gathered my tools to leave, Vivian walked me to the door. On the porch, I turned to thank her for the tea and conversation. Before you go, she said, her expression suddenly serious. Can I ask you something? Of course. She leaned against the doorframe, studying me with those perceptive eyes. At 53, I don't care what people think anymore. Do you? The question hung in the air between us, simple yet profound. Did I care what others thought? The honest answer was yes, probably too much. It was why my designs stayed mostly in my garage, why I continued taking handyman jobs instead of pursuing my passion fully, why I hesitated when opportunities arose. "I'm working on it," I finally answered. Vivian nodded, seemingly satisfied with my honesty. "That's a start. See you Saturday, Alex." Driving home, my mind buzzed with our conversation. I couldn't remember the last time I'd spoken so openly with someone, let alone a client I barely knew. There was something disarming about Vivian. Her directness, her willingness to share her own struggles, her complete lack of pretension despite her obvious talents. I called my best friend Marcus as soon as I got home. "Dude," I said when he answered, "you won't believe the conversation I just had with a client." Marcus laughed. "Please tell me it's not another story about the lady who wanted you to install outlets 6 inches from the floor for her pet rabbits." "No, nothing like that," I said, recounting my afternoon with Vivian. "And now I'm apparently going to some dinner party with a bunch of artists on Saturday." Wait, Marcus interrupted. "Let me get this straight. A mysterious photographer who used to be a hotshot lawyer has invited you to a fancy dinner party where you might meet people who could actually help with your lighting business? And you're what? Nervous about it?" Put that way, it did sound ridiculous. I guess I am. What if my work isn't good enough? What if I say something stupid? What if you don't go and spend the rest of your life wondering what might have happened if you had? Marcus countered. "Come on, Alex. This is exactly the kind of opportunity you've been waiting for." I know, I sighed. "It's just scary." "Everything worth doing is," he said simply. "Remember when I quit my accounting job to open the coffee shop? I threw up twice the morning I signed the lease." I laughed, recalling how terrified Marcus had been. 3 years later, Grounded was the most popular cafe in town, and he'd never been happier. "Fair point," I conceded. "So, which piece should I bring?" We spent the next hour debating the merits of different designs. The copper wire pendant was my most polished work, but the reclaimed wood floor lamp better showcased my personal style. In the end, we settled on my newest creation, a table lamp made from bent copper tubing and salvaged industrial glass that cast intricate shadows when lit. "That's the one," Marcus declared. "It's different from anything I've seen before." After hanging up, I went out to my garage workshop. The space was cramped but organized, with shelves of materials, a workbench my father had built, and various tools I'd collected over the years. My designs were arranged throughout, some completed, others in various stages of progress. I located the copper and glass lamp and switched it on, watching as it cast web-like patterns across the walls. It was good, I thought. Maybe not gallery-worthy yet, but definitely heading in that direction. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to really consider what it would be like to pursue this dream seriously. To phase out the handyman work, gradually. To have a small studio where I could create and perhaps even sell my designs directly to people who appreciated them. Vivian's question echoed in my mind. At 53, I don't care what people think anymore. Do you? Standing there in my workshop, surrounded by creations that represented my truest self, I made a decision. I would go to that dinner party. I would bring my lamp. And I would try, really try, to stop caring so much about others' judgments. After all, if Vivian could reinvent herself at 50, what was stopping me at 31? The rest of the week passed in a blur of routine handyman jobs, interspersed with evenings spent in my workshop. Inspired by my conversation with Vivian, I pulled out designs I'd abandoned months ago, seeing them with fresh eyes. I refined the lamp I planned to bring to the dinner party, polishing the copper to a warm glow and adjusting the glass shade for the perfect light diffusion. By Saturday evening, I was a bundle of nerves. I changed outfits 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a navy button-up. Casual enough to feel like myself, but nice enough for a dinner party. I carefully wrapped the lamp in a soft cloth and placed it in a box lined with padding. As I drove to Vivian's house, I rehearsed what I might say if someone asked about my work. Not apologetic, I reminded myself. Not self-deprecating. Just honest and passionate. The way Vivian had spoken about her photography. When I arrived, several cars were already parked along the street. I took a deep breath, grabbed the box containing my lamp, and walked up to the front door. Before I could knock, it swung open, revealing Vivian in a simple black dress, her hair down around her shoulders. Alex! She greeted me warmly. I'm so glad you came. And you brought your work. Perfect. She ushered me inside, where the house had been transformed. Soft lighting illuminated the space, music played quietly in the background, and the dining table was beautifully set for 8 people. 4 guests were already mingling in the living room, drinks in hand. Everyone, Vivian announced. This is Alex, the talented lighting designer I told you about. I felt my face grow warm at her introduction, but managed to smile and a wave. Come, she said, leading me to the group. Let me introduce you properly. The next hour was both exhilarating and terrifying. Vivian introduced me to everyone with the kind of enthusiasm that made me stand a little straighter. There was Catherine, the friend she'd mentioned from her New York days, now a curator at the city's Contemporary Art Museum. Daniel, a furniture designer whose minimalist tables I recognized from design magazines. Eliza, a retired professor who collected emerging artists' work, and her husband James, an architect. The final 2 guests arrived shortly after me. Julian Green, the gallery owner whose card Vivian had given me, and his partner Michael, a graphic designer. So you're the lighting genius Vivian's been raving about, Julian said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. I'm intrigued. She's been very generous, I said, fighting the urge to downplay my work. I'm still developing my style. Aren't we all? He replied with a wink. I've been in this business 20 years and still feel like I'm figuring it out some days. Now, where's this piece I've heard about? With trembling hands, I unwrapped my lamp and placed it on a side table, plugging it into a nearby outlet. As it illuminated, casting its intricate shadow patterns across the wall, a hush fell over the small group that had gathered around. Oh, that's lovely, Eliza murmured, reaching out as if to touch the shadows on the wall. The copper work is exquisite, Daniel observed, bending to examine the joints more closely. Did you forge these connections yourself? I nodded, explaining my process and the challenges of working with the salvaged industrial glass. The conversation flowed naturally from there, with each person asking questions or offering observations that showed they were taking my work seriously. Not humoring me, not being polite, actually engaging with my creation as a legitimate piece of art. Julian circled the lamp thoughtfully. The interplay between the structured metal and the organic light patterns is fascinating. It's industrial but somehow deeply natural at the same time. That's exactly what I was going for, I said, surprised and pleased that he'd seen my intention so clearly. Do you have other pieces? He asked. A few, I admitted, mostly in my garage workshop. Some are finished, others are still in progress. Julian handed me his card, the same one Vivian had given me, but this time with his cell number scribbled on the back. Call my assistant on Monday. I'd like to see more. My heart hammered in my chest. For the gallery? I managed to ask. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, he said with a smile that wasn't unkind. But I'm always looking for new talent, and this, he gestured to the lamp, has definitely caught my interest. Vivian appeared at my side, champagne flute in hand. I told you he was good, she said to Julian, handing me a glass of my own. You did, he agreed. And you weren't exaggerating for once. As Julian moved away to greet someone else, I turned to Vivian. Thank you, I said quietly, for this opportunity, for believing in me enough to put your own reputation on the line. She waved away my gratitude. I have an eye for talent, that's all. The rest is up to you. Dinner was served shortly after, a delicious meal of roasted salmon, wild rice, and seasonal vegetables that Vivian had prepared herself. The conversation around the table flowed easily, touching on everything from the city's newest public art installation to the challenges of creative work in a digital age. I mostly listened, soaking in perspectives from people who lived in a world I'd only observed from a distance. They argued passionately about artists I'd never heard of, debated the merits of various galleries, and shared stories of spectacular failures and unexpected successes. Alex, Catherine said during a lull in the conversation, Vivian tells me you're still working as a handyman while developing your lighting designs. How do you balance the two? All eyes turned to me, and I took a sip of wine to gather my thoughts. Not very well, to be honest, I finally said, deciding that honesty was better than pretense. The handyman work pays the bills, but it takes time away from what I really want to be doing. It's a catch-22. I need financial stability to create, but I need to create more to achieve financial stability through my art. Nods of understanding circled the table. It was a dilemma familiar to many artists. I delivered pizzas for 3 years while building my portfolio, Michael offered. Came home smelling like pepperoni every night, but it gave me the freedom to be selective about design clients. I taught high school for a decade before my furniture could support me, Daniel added. There's no shame in having a day job. The key is to make sure it doesn't become an excuse, Eliza said gently. It's easy to tell yourself you'll pursue your passions someday when circumstances are perfect. Which they never are, James finished for her. What's your vision, ultimately? Julian asked, leaning forward. If everything fell into place, what would your life as a lighting designer look like? The question caught me off guard. I'd thought extensively about individual designs, but less about the big picture of my career and life. Under the expectant gazes of these accomplished creatives, I forced myself to articulate dreams I'd barely admitted to myself. I'd have a small studio, I began slowly. Not just for creating, but for displaying finished pieces. Somewhere people could see how the light works in different environments. I'd collaborate with interior designers and architects, creating custom pieces for specific spaces. And I'd have a line of smaller, more accessible designs for people who appreciate handcrafted lighting but can't afford completely bespoke work. As I spoke, the vision became clearer, more tangible. I could almost see the space, smell the metal and wood, feel the satisfaction of seeing my creations illuminating beautiful rooms. That sounds entirely achievable, Julian said when I finished. Ambitious, yes, but grounded in reality. The question is, Vivian interjected, what's stopping you from taking the first step? The directness of her question silenced the table. What was stopping me? Fear, certainly. Limited resources. But mostly a deep-seated belief that people like me, ordinary people from ordinary backgrounds, didn't get to have extraordinary lives. I guess I've never fully believed it was possible, I admitted, the truth of the words surprising even me. And now? Catherine asked softly. I looked around at these people who had welcomed me into their circle without hesitation, who discussed my work with genuine interest, who shared their own struggles openly. Now I'm starting to wonder if I've been wrong all along. After dinner, the party moved back to the living room. Julian spent several minutes examining my lamp again, taking photos from different angles and asking detailed questions about my techniques. Eliza pulled me aside to discuss the possibility of commissioning a piece for her sunroom. Daniel and I exchanged contact information, with promises to meet up and share resources on metalworking techniques. It was surreal. This group of established creatives treating me like a peer rather than an imposter. Throughout the evening, I caught Vivian watching me with a satisfied smile, as if witnessing the unfolding of a plan she'd set in motion. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, Julian approached me one last time. Don't forget to call my assistant, he said. I'm serious about seeing more of your work. I will, I promised, still somewhat dazed by the evening's developments. When only Vivian and I remained, I helped her clear the last of the dishes despite her protests. You're supposed to be a guest, she chided, taking a plate from my hands. And you're supposed to be resting after hosting an amazing dinner party, I countered. Besides, I owe you far more than washing a few dishes. She smiled, relenting. Fine. You wash, I'll dry. We worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes before I spoke. I don't know how to thank you for tonight. For all of this. You don't need to thank me, she said, carefully drying a wine glass. Just do something with the opportunity. I will, I assured her, though I'm still not entirely sure how all this happened. A week ago, I was just fixing your chandelier, and now Julian Green wants to see my portfolio. Vivian laughed. Life changes in an instant sometimes. One decision, one chance meeting, one moment of courage can alter everything. Like quitting your law career? Exactly like that. She nodded. Though I should be honest, it wasn't quite as clean and decisive as I made it sound. There were months of agonizing, of planning, of second-guessing. But once I made the leap, I never looked back. Were you ever afraid you'd made a huge mistake? She considered this, leaning against the counter. Terrified at times, especially when money got tight or when my first attempts at photography were laughably bad. But even in those moments, I never wanted my old life back. The freedom of pursuing something I loved outweighed all the security I'd left behind. I handed her the last dish and dried my hands on a towel. I don't think I've thanked you properly for the question you asked me on your porch. About caring what people think. And? Have you given it more thought? I have, I nodded. Tonight made me realize how much time I've wasted worrying about others' judgments instead of just doing the work I love. How many opportunities I've missed because I was afraid of rejection or criticism. It's a common affliction, Vivian said. We're social creatures, hardwired to seek approval. Breaking free of that isn't easy. How did you do it? I asked. Really, beyond just deciding not to care. She leaned against the counter, thoughtful. I surrounded myself with people who supported my choices, even when they didn't understand them. I practiced saying no to things that weren't aligned with my new path, even when it was uncomfortable, and I gave myself permission to fail spectacularly, as long as I was failing while doing something I cared about. That last part is the hardest, I admitted. It is, she agreed, but also the most liberating. Once you accept that failure is just information, feedback that helps you adjust course. It loses much of its power over you. We moved to the living room, where my lamp still cast its web of shadows across the wall. Vivian settled into an armchair, gesturing for me to take the one opposite. There's something I haven't told you, she said, her expression turning serious. About why I asked you that question on the porch. I waited, curious. Last year, I was diagnosed with a heart condition, she continued. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but a reminder of mortality nonetheless. It forced me to evaluate how I was spending whatever time I have left. She smiled wryly. Nothing clarifies priorities quite like a cardiologist looking concerned. I'm sorry, I said, unsure what else to offer. Don't be. In many ways, it was a gift, this stark reminder that life is finite. It made me even more determined to live authentically, to stop wasting energy on appearances or others' expectations. She leaned forward slightly. When I saw you that day, tinkering with my chandelier but clearly meant for something more, I recognized a familiar pattern. Someone with obvious talent, holding back out of fear or uncertainty. And you decided to intervene? I asked, half amused, half touched by her interest in my journey. Call it paying forward a kindness that was once done for me, she said. A former colleague took a similar interest in my photography when I was just starting out. She had no reason to help me, but she did. Introductions, advice, encouragement when I needed it most. Her eyes met mine. Sometimes we need someone else to believe in us before we can fully believe in ourselves. The truth of her words resonated deeply. Until tonight, my dreams had existed mostly in isolation, private hopes without external validation. Having others see potential in my work had shifted something fundamental in how I viewed my own abilities. Well, your intervention worked, I told her. I'm calling Julian's assistant first thing Monday morning. Good, she nodded, satisfied. And what about the competition? The one you mentioned you've been too intimidated to enter? I'd almost forgotten I'd shared that with her. The deadline's in 3 weeks. Perfect timing, she declared. You can use the piece you're submitting to Julian as your entry. You don't think it's too ambitious? Approaching a gallery and entering a competition at the same time? Vivian's laugh was warm and genuine. At 53, I've learned that life's too short for small moves. Make them both. The worst that happens is you get 2 rejections instead of 1, and you're no worse off than before. The best that happens. She trailed off, letting me fill in the possibilities. The best that happens is doors start opening, I finished. Exactly. We talked late into the night, our conversation ranging from creative processes to life philosophies. Vivian shared stories from her legal career and her transition to photography. The mistakes made, lessons learned, unexpected joys discovered. I found myself opening up about my father's illness and death, how it had both motivated me to continue his business and somehow delayed my own artistic pursuits. He would be proud, you know, Vivian said gently, of both your dedication to his legacy and your determination to create your own. I hope so, I said, surprised by the emotion that thickened my voice. He always encouraged my designs, even when they were just crude sketches. He'd set aside scraps of interesting materials he thought I might use. Then he'd be thrilled to see where you're headed now, she assured me. Sometimes honoring someone's memory means carrying forward their belief in you, not just their business. When I finally gathered my lamp and prepared to leave, it was well past midnight. Vivian walked me to the door, just as she had a week earlier. Thank you, I said simply, knowing no elaborate expression of gratitude could capture what this evening had meant to me. Remember what we talked about, she replied, about not caring what others think. I'm working on it, I promised. More seriously now. Good. Because talent like yours shouldn't be hidden in a garage. The world needs beauty, Alex, especially the kind that transforms ordinary spaces with extraordinary light. Driving home under a canopy of stars, I felt a clarity and purpose I hadn't experienced in years. The evening replayed in my mind: Julian's interest, Eliza's potential commission, the easy acceptance into this circle of creatives. But more than these tangible opportunities, what stayed with me was the shift in perspective. For too long, I'd been living within the confines of others' expectations and my own limiting beliefs, defining myself as a handyman who sometimes made lights, rather than an artist who happened to be good with his hands, waiting for permission or validation before fully committing to my passion. By the time I reached home, a decision had crystallized. I would continue my handyman work for financial stability, but with clear boundaries: 3 days a week, no more. The remaining time would be dedicated to creating, to building a proper portfolio, to pursuing opportunities like the one Julian had offered. I entered my house with renewed energy despite the late hour. Instead of heading to bed, I went straight to my garage workshop, switching on the lights and standing amid my creations. Some finished, others in progress, each representing a piece of my creative vision. Taking out my phone, I began photographing each piece systematically, from multiple angles with proper lighting. These would form the beginning of the portfolio I'd show Julian. Next, I pulled out the entry form for the lighting design competition I'd been avoiding, reading through the requirements carefully before setting it aside to complete tomorrow. As I worked, I thought about Vivian's journey. From successful lawyer to struggling photography student to established artist. About her question on the porch that had sparked this chain of events. About her dinner party that had connected me with people who could help advance my dreams. At 53, I don't care what people think anymore, do you? The question had challenged me, unsettled me, ultimately inspired me. And though I couldn't claim to be fully liberated from others' opinions, I was taking steps in that direction. Beginning to place my own creative vision and fulfillment above external validation or conventional paths. Around 2 a.m., exhausted but exhilarated, I finally headed to bed. Before sleep claimed me, I sent a text to Marcus. You won't believe what happened tonight. Drinks tomorrow? I have big news. His reply came seconds later, despite the hour. About damn time. Proud of you, whatever it is. I fell asleep smiling, anticipating the changes to come. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window and a sense of possibility that made me eager to start the day. Sunday was usually my day off, a time for catching up on household chores or occasionally helping friends with small repairs. Today, however, I had different plans. After a quick breakfast, I returned to my garage workshop, determined to make progress on the portfolio I'd need for my meeting with Julian. I sorted through my designs, selecting the strongest pieces that showcased different techniques and styles. Some were fully realized works, others just detailed sketches or prototypes, but together they told the story of my creative evolution. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Alex, it's Vivian. Hope I'm not disturbing your Sunday. Just checking in to see how you're feeling after last night. I smiled, touched by her follow-up. Not disturbing at all. Been in the workshop since 8 a.m., organizing portfolio for Julian. Still processing everything. Thank you again. Her reply came quickly. Excellent. Strike while the iron is hot. By the way, Eliza is serious about that commission. Expect her call this week. This confirmation sent another wave of excitement through me. One dinner party had potentially led to both a gallery meeting and a commission. More opportunity. than I'd created for myself in the past 3 years combined. Later that afternoon, I met Marcus at Grounded, his coffee shop that had become a local favorite for its warm atmosphere and exceptional espresso. Sunday afternoons were relatively quiet, allowing him to join me at a corner table after serving a few customers. "All right," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Spill it. What happened at this dinner party that has you looking like you won the lottery?" I recounted the evening in detail, Julian's interest in my work, Eliza's talk of a commission, the acceptance I'd felt among these established creatives. As I spoke, Marcus's expression shifted from curiosity to genuine excitement. "This is huge, Alex," he said when I finished. "Like, life-changing huge." "I know," I nodded. "It's overwhelming, honestly. A week ago, I was just fixing lights, and now you're designing them," he finished for me. "Like you were always meant to." "It's not a sure thing yet," I cautioned. "Julian might hate the rest of my work. The commission might fall through." Marcus leaned back, studying me with a familiar exasperation. "There you go again, preparing for failure before success even has a chance." "Being realistic," I countered. "Being self-sabotaging," he corrected. "Look, even if those specific opportunities don't pan out, which I think they will, you've crossed a threshold. You've stepped into the arena. You're playing the game instead of watching from the sidelines. That's the real win here." Marcus was right, as usual. His words stayed with me as I drove home from the coffee shop, a sense of determination building with each mile. Playing the game instead of watching from the sidelines. That was exactly what I needed to do, not just with Julian's gallery, opportunity, or Eliza's potential commission, but with every aspect of my creative life. Monday morning dawned bright and clear. I had 2 handyman appointments scheduled, but before heading out, I called Julian's gallery and spoke with his assistant, a brisk, efficient woman named Paige who seemed unsurprised by my call. "Julian mentioned you'd be in touch," she said. "He has an opening this Thursday at 3 p.m. Would that work for you?" My heart skipped. This was really happening. "Thursday at 3 works perfectly," I confirmed, already mentally rearranging my schedule to free up the afternoon. "Excellent. Bring 5 to 7 pieces that best represent your work and vision. Physical pieces are preferred, but high-quality photographs are acceptable for larger items." I thanked her and hung up, my mind already racing through which designs to include. The copper and glass lamp was an obvious choice, but what else would showcase the breadth of my abilities? My phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. "Any word? From Julian yet?" I quickly replied, "Meeting set for Thursday afternoon," slightly terrified. Her response came moments later. "Good. Terror means you're taking it seriously. Want to meet tomorrow to discuss your portfolio selection?" Her offer of help touched me deeply. "That would be amazing. Thank you." We arranged to meet at her house the following afternoon. With that settled, I headed out to my first appointment of the day, fixing a garbage disposal for a family across town. As I worked, part of my mind remained occupied with my upcoming gallery meeting, mentally cataloging my designs and considering how to present them effectively. By Tuesday afternoon, I had selected 8 potential pieces for my portfolio, photographed them meticulously, and printed the images as a reference. I carefully loaded 5 of the physical pieces, those small enough to transport easily, into my truck and drove to Vivian's house, nervous but excited about her input. She greeted me warmly, immediately helping to carry the pieces inside. We arranged them on her dining table, along with the photographs of my larger works that couldn't be transported. "Tell me about your selection process," she said, surveying the collection thoughtfully. I explained my thinking, how I'd chosen pieces that demonstrated different techniques and materials, from the delicate copper wirework to the more industrial steel and salvaged glass combinations. How I'd included both functional lighting and, more sculptural, artistic pieces. Vivian listened attentively, occasionally asking questions about specific details or techniques. When I finished, she studied the collection in silence for several minutes. "It's a strong selection," she finally said, "but I think we can refine it further. You're showing technical versatility, which is good, but we should also emphasize the consistency of your artistic voice." She moved the pieces around, creating a new arrangement. "These 5 tell a cohesive story," she explained, indicating the copper and glass lamp, a pendant light with intricately woven wire, a wall sconce that projected patterned shadows, and 2 table lamps with similar aesthetic elements but different materials. What ties them together is this play between structure and fluidity, the way you use rigid materials to create organic light effects. That's your signature, whether you realized it or not. I hadn't thought of my work in those terms before, but as soon as she articulated it, I recognized the truth in her observation. There was a common thread running through my favorite pieces, this tension between the structured materials and the flowing, almost liquid quality of the light they produced. For the gallery meeting, focus on this narrative, Vivian advised. Julian doesn't just want to see technical skill. He wants to understand your perspective as an artist, what you're saying through your work that nobody else is saying. We spent the next 2 hours discussing presentation strategies, potential pricing if Julian expressed interest in selling my pieces, and how to talk about my background and influences, without downplaying my self-taught status. Don't apologize for your path, Vivian emphasized. Your background as a handyman isn't a liability. It's what gives your work its distinctive character. You understand materials and structures in a way formally trained designers might not. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across her dining room, Vivian made us tea. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping from mismatched vintage cups. "Can I ask you something personal?" I ventured after a while. She nodded, setting down her cup. "Of course. When you were diagnosed with your heart condition, how did that change your approach to your work, beyond just the general reminder of mortality?" Vivian seemed surprised by the question, but considered it seriously. "It made me less patient with artistic detours," she said finally. "Before, I might spend months exploring a new technique or subject that didn't really speak to me, out of some sense that I should be versatile or open to everything. After the diagnosis, I became much more selective, focusing only on the work that felt essential, the images I would regret not creating." She paused, tracing the rim of her teacup with one finger. "It also made me bolder about sharing my work. I stopped waiting to feel ready or for pieces to be perfect. Perfect doesn't exist, and ready is just a moving target we create to justify our hesitation." "That resonates," I admitted. "I've been holding on to some designs for years, always finding some small aspect to refine before considering them complete." "The art is never truly finished," Vivian said with a gentle smile. "At some point, you simply decide to stop working on it and let it exist in the world. That decision gets easier with practice, and with the awareness that our creative time isn't infinite." As I gathered my pieces to leave, Vivian stopped me with a hand on my arm. "One last thing about Thursday," she said. "Julian can be intimidating, but remember that he needs artists as much as artists need galleries. This isn't a favor he's doing you. It's a potential business relationship that would benefit you both." I nodded, grateful for the reminder. "I'll try to keep that in perspective." "And Alex," she added as I reached the door, "whatever happens with Julian, this is just the beginning. You've taken the first step toward living as the artist you are, not just the handyman people see." Those words carried me through the next 2 days as I balanced handyman appointments with final preparations for the gallery meeting. I practiced discussing my work without self-deprecation or excessive technical detail. I polished each piece to perfection and secured them carefully for transport. Thursday arrived with a mix of cloud and sunshine that matched my fluctuating confidence. I completed a morning job replacing kitchen fixtures, then returned home to shower and change into clothes that struck a balance between professional and authentic: dark jeans, a crisp button-down, and the leather jacket my father had given me years ago. On the drive to Greenlight Gallery, I played the classical music that always calmed my nerves. Bach's mathematical precision reminded me of the careful measurements and calculations that went into my designs, the underlying structure that supported creative expression. The gallery was located in the Arts District, a revitalized area of former warehouses now housing studios, galleries, and artisanal businesses. Its exterior was understated: clean lines, large windows, and a simple sign identifying it as green light in minimalist typography. I parked nearby, took a deep breath, and carefully unloaded my pieces, Balancing the box containing my work, I pushed open the gallery door with my shoulder, stepping into a space of white walls, polished concrete floors, and thoughtfully arranged lighting that showcased a diverse collection of functional art. Paige, Julian's assistant, greeted me from behind a sleek desk. "You must be Alex," she said, rising to help me with my burden. "Perfect timing. Julian just finished a call and asked me to bring you right back." She led me through the main gallery space, where furniture, lighting, and textile art created distinctive vignettes that demonstrated how functional pieces could transform a living environment. I tried not to gawk at the price tags discreetly. Attached to each item, numbers that made my tentative pricing ideas seem almost comically modest. Julian's office was at the rear of the gallery, a glass-walled space that somehow managed to feel both transparent and private. He rose as we entered, extending his hand with the same warm confidence I remembered from Vivian's dinner party. "Alex, wonderful to see you again. I've been looking forward to this." His enthusiasm seemed genuine, putting me slightly more at ease. We set my pieces on a large table by the window, where natural light supplemented the gallery's carefully designed illumination. "Before we look at your work," Julian began, gesturing for me to take a seat. "Tell me a bit more about your background. Vivian mentioned you're primarily self-taught?" I nodded, launching into the narrative I'd prepared. My father's influence, my early experiments with materials, how my handyman work had inadvertently become a master class in understanding how different homes used light. I shared how fixing other people's fixtures had inspired me to create my own, translating the technical knowledge of an electrician into the vision of an artist. Julian listened intently, occasionally asking questions that suggested real engagement rather than polite interest. When I finished, he smiled. "That's exactly the kind of organic development I find most compelling in artists. Formal education has its place, but there's something special about creativity that emerges from practical experience and necessity." With that encouraging start, we turned to my pieces. I unwrapped each one carefully, arranging them on the table before plugging them in to demonstrate their light effects. Julian examined each in turn, asking specific questions about materials, techniques, and inspirations. His observations were keen, noting details I hadn't explicitly pointed out and making connections between pieces that highlighted the cohesive elements Vivian had identified. "This interplay between structure and organic light patterns is fascinating," he remarked, echoing almost exactly what he'd said at Vivian's dinner party. "There's a consistent voice here, despite the variety of materials and forms." He paused at the copper and glass lamp that had first caught his attention. "This remains my favorite," he said, watching the shadow patterns on the wall. "It achieves a perfect balance between function and art. Beautiful as an object, but transformative in how it affects the space around it." My heart pounded as he circled the table once more, his expression thoughtful. Was this going well? I couldn't tell. Julian's poker face was impeccable. "Here's what I'm thinking," he finally said, returning to his seat. "These pieces are strong, distinctive, well executed, with a clear perspective. They're not quite ready for a solo exhibition, but they absolutely deserve to be seen." He leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. "I'd like to include 2 or 3 of your pieces in our upcoming group show, New Perspectives in Functional Art. It opens in 6 weeks, featuring 8 emerging artists pushing the boundaries between craft and fine art." I struggled to maintain my composure. A group show at Greenlight Gallery was far more than I'd dared to hope for from this meeting. "I'd be honored," I managed to say. Julian nodded, seemingly pleased with my response. "I'd select the copper and glass lamp certainly, and probably the wall sconce with the perforated metal shade. Both exemplify what makes your work special. For the third piece, I'd like to see something new. Perhaps a pendant light that continues this exploration of structure versus organic form." "I have several designs in progress," I said, excitement building. "I could have something ready within a month." "Perfect." Julian smiled. "We'll need to discuss pricing, contracts, and logistics, but Paige can handle those details with you. For now, I'd like you to take these pieces back to your workshop, continue refining your vision, and let me see the new pendant when it's ready." As we shook hands, sealing the agreement, Julian added, "By the way, I'd encourage you to follow through with that competition entry Vivian mentioned. External validation is helpful for emerging artists, especially when approaching galleries other than mine. I left the gallery in a state of dazed euphoria, carefully loading my pieces back into the truck before pulling out my phone to text Vivian. He wants 3 pieces for a group show next month, including a new commission. Her reply came immediately. I knew it. Come over and tell me everything. Instead of texting back, I called her. I'm heading to your place now, if that's okay. I need to thank you in person. Of course, she laughed. I'll open some champagne. This calls for a celebration. 20 minutes later, I was seated on Vivian's porch, a glass of champagne in hand, recounting every detail of the meeting. She listened with evident delight, occasionally asking clarifying questions or offering insights about Julian's comments. A group show is the perfect next step, she said when I finished. It introduces your work to Julian's collector base without the pressure of filling an entire exhibition. And having him commission a new piece shows he's investing in your development, not just selecting what already exists. I shook my head, still processing the opportunity. None of this would have happened without you, Vivian. Not just the introduction to Julian, but the push to take my work seriously in the first place. She waved away my gratitude. You're giving me too much credit. The talent was always there. You just needed someone to reflect it back to you. It was more than that, I insisted. Your question that day, about not caring what people think, it changed something fundamental for me, made me realize how much of my life was being lived for others' approval rather than my own fulfillment. Vivian smiled, a touch of melancholy in her eyes. That's the tragedy of so many lives, isn't it? All that potential, all that uniqueness, diluted by the constant effort to fit into others' expectations. She raised her glass. Here's to breaking free of that particular prison. We clinked glasses, and I felt a surge of gratitude for this unexpected friendship. What had begun as a simple repair job had evolved into a relationship that was transforming my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. So, Vivian said after a moment, what's next on your liberation journey? I considered the question. Practically speaking, I need to reorganize my schedule to create more studio time. Julian wants the new pendant in a month, and I'd like to exceed his expectations. And the competition entry? Due next week, I confirmed. I'm submitting the copper and glass lamp design. Excellent. She nodded approvingly. And beyond that, any thoughts about that studio space you mentioned? The question caught me off guard. I'd spoken of a studio as a distant dream, not an immediate possibility. That's still down the road, I think. After I see how the group show goes, maybe. Vivian studied me over the rim of her glass. What if it didn't have to be? What do you mean? She set down her champagne and leaned forward. I've been thinking about this since our conversation last week. The 3rd floor of this house has a large open space. Originally a ballroom, if you can believe it. It gets beautiful northern light through those dormer windows you can see from the street. I stared at her, not quite comprehending what she was suggesting. It's been used as storage since I moved in, she continued. But with some clearing out, it could make an excellent studio space. Better than a garage, certainly. Are you offering me your 3rd floor? I asked, incredulous. As a temporary arrangement, she clarified. 6 months, perhaps? Long enough for you to build momentum with your work and save for your own space. You'd have room to create larger pieces, proper lighting for photography, even a small area where clients could view your work in progress. I was speechless. The generosity of the offer was overwhelming, not just the physical space, but the vote of confidence it represented. I don't know what to say, I finally managed. That's incredibly generous. It's practical, she countered. The space is sitting empty, and your work needs room to grow. Think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement. You get a studio, and I get the satisfaction of watching an artist develop. Plus, she added with a twinkle in her eye, I'd have a handyman on call for all those little repairs an old house constantly needs. I laughed, recognizing her attempt to frame the offer in terms I might find easier to accept. Can I at least pay you rent? We can discuss a nominal amount, she allowed. But I'd rather see you investing in materials and equipment. This is seed funding, essentially, my bet on your future success. The potential of what she was offering began to sink in. A proper studio space would transform my capacity to create, not just physically, but psychologically. It would be a statement to myself and others that my art deserved room, resources, priority. Let me think about it, I asked, not wanting to make such a significant decision on the spot. Of course, she nodded. The offer stands whenever you're ready, no pressure. But as we continued talking, the idea took root and began to flourish in my imagination. By the time I left Vivian's house that evening, I was already mentally designing the layout of a third-floor studio, envisioning the creative possibilities such a space would enable. Over the next week, events moved with a momentum that left me both exhilarated and slightly breathless. I submitted my entry to the lighting design competition, worked on sketches for Julian's commissioned pendant, and began gradually informing my regular handyman clients that I was transitioning to a more limited schedule to focus on my lighting design business. Most were supportive, if surprised. A few expressed disappointment, having come to rely on my availability and attention to detail. One client, Mrs. Harmon, an elderly woman whose house I'd been maintaining for years, responded with unexpected enthusiasm. "It's about time," she declared when I explained the situation. "I've seen how your eyes light up when you talk about those fancy lamps you make. Regular electrical work never did that." Her validation touched me deeply. "I'll still help with anything you need," I assured her. "You've been too good to me over the years for me to leave you hanging." She waved away my promise. "Don't you worry about me. My nephew's boy is studying electrical engineering at the community college. He can handle my little fixes. You go make beautiful things." These conversations, once so intimidating to contemplate, became easier with practice. Each time I articulated my changing path, my commitment to it strengthened. I was no longer just testing the waters of artistic identity. I was diving in fully, claiming it as my own. The following Tuesday, I met Vivian at her house to view the third-floor space she'd offered as a studio. Climbing the narrow stairs to the top of the Victorian, I tried to manage my expectations. However generous the offer, an unfinished attic might not be suitable for the kind of work I needed to do. When Vivian opened the door at the top of the stairs, however, all concerns evaporated. The space was magnificent, a vast open room with high ceilings, dormer windows flooding the area with natural light, and hardwood floors worn to a soft patina by decades of use. "This was really a ballroom?" I asked, turning slowly to take in the full expanse. "In the house's early days," Vivian nodded. "The original owners were apparently quite the social butterflies, hosted regular dances up here for the town's elite. I could almost see it. Ladies in flowing gowns, gentlemen in formal attire, music and laughter filling this beautiful space. Now it was cluttered with storage boxes, covered furniture, and the miscellaneous accumulation of a house with more space than its occupant needed. It would take some work to clear out," Vivian acknowledged, following my gaze. "But the bones are perfect for a studio. Northern light, high ceilings, solid floors that can support heavy equipment." She was right. With some organization and basic setup, this could be an incredible workspace, far better than my cramped garage. I moved to one of the windows, noting the views across town to the distant hills. The setting was inspirational in itself. "I'd want to install better electrical," I said, already mentally planning. "The lighting fixtures are outdated, and I'd need dedicated circuits for some of my equipment." "Of course," Vivian agreed. "Any improvements you make would only benefit the house." And as I said, having a handyman-turned-artist in residence has its advantages. I turned to face her, emotion welling unexpectedly. "I don't know how to thank you for this. For all of it." Her expression softened. "You can thank me by using this space to create extraordinary work, by refusing to play small anymore." "I will," I promised, the words feeling like a vow. No more holding back. That evening, I called Marcus to share the latest developments. Julian's group show, the competition entry, and now Vivian's offer of studio space. His reaction was a mix of excitement and vindication. "I've been telling you for years that you're too talented to be fixing other people's broken light switches," he said. "All it took was a straight-talking 53-year-old woman to make you believe it." I laughed, acknowledging the truth in his observation. "She has a way of cutting through all the excuses and fears, making me see possibilities instead of obstacles." "So you're taking the studio space?" "I think so," I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "It feels like the right next step, a commitment to this new direction. The transformation of Vivian's third-floor ballroom into my studio happened faster than I expected. What began as a one-person project quickly evolved into a community effort when Marcus showed up on Saturday morning with coffee, donuts, and 3 friends I hadn't seen in months. "Reinforcements," he announced, grinning at my surprised expression. "You didn't think I'd let you tackle this alone, did you?" Before I could respond, a horn honked outside. Through the window, I spotted my cousin Delia's pickup truck pulling up, her husband Dave in the passenger seat. They'd driven nearly 2 hours to help, bringing with them a collection of shelving units Delia's office had been discarding. "Word travels fast," I said to Marcus, touched by the show of support. He shrugged. "People want to be part of something meaningful, and this—" he gestured at the space around us. "This is definitely meaningful." Vivian appeared at the top of the stairs, carrying a tray of lemonade. Far from being overwhelmed by the sudden invasion of helpers, she seemed delighted. "I called in reinforcements of my own," she said, nodding toward the staircase where Catherine from the dinner party emerged, followed by a tall man I didn't recognize. "This is my brother Paul," Vivian explained. "He's an architect with strong opinions about studio layouts." Paul stepped forward to shake my hand. "And access to a truck for hauling away whatever doesn't belong in your creative space," he added with a smile. What I'd anticipated as a weeks-long solo project became a vibrant, collaborative day of transformation. Marcus and his friends tackled the heavy lifting, clearing out old furniture and boxes. Dave, an electrician by trade, inspected the wiring, and immediately began upgrading outlets and installing new lighting fixtures I'd brought. Delia organized smaller items into keep, donate, and discard piles with ruthless efficiency. Paul sketched potential layouts, consulting with me about workflow and light requirements. By mid-afternoon, the space was unrecognizable. Sunlight streamed through now unobstructed windows, illuminating clean, open floors. The shelving units had been assembled along one wall, ready to organize materials and tools. Dave had installed a series of track lights that could be adjusted for different working conditions, plus dedicated circuits for my equipment. "This is incredible," I said, standing in the center of what was rapidly becoming a real studio. "I can't believe how much we've accomplished in one day." "Many hands," Vivian observed with satisfaction, "and a clear vision." That evening, after everyone had gone and the house settled into quiet, Vivian and I sat on her back porch, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. I was exhausted but exhilarated, my mind already filling the newly cleared space with creative possibilities. "I've been thinking about what you said that first day," I told her. "About not caring what people think anymore. Today felt like a step toward that freedom." "How so?" she asked, genuinely curious. I considered the question. For years, I've kept my creative work separate from most of my relationships. Like I was afraid people would find it pretentious that I considered myself an artist, or that they'd judge the work and find it lacking. I gestured toward the house. But today, letting everyone see that part of me, having them actively support it, it was liberating. Vivian nodded. When we compartmentalize parts of ourselves, we miss opportunities for connection. Your friends didn't just help clear a room today. They affirmed an identity you've been hesitant to claim. Exactly, I agreed. It feels like things are aligning in a way they never have before. The gallery opportunity, the studio space, people supporting my decision to change direction. The universe tends to make way for authentic action, Vivian said with a small smile. When we move decisively toward what truly matters to us, doors open that we couldn't have anticipated. The next morning, I began moving my equipment and materials from the garage to the new studio. Each trip up those stairs felt symbolic, transitioning from a makeshift workspace to a dedicated creative environment. By afternoon, I was settled enough to begin work on Julian's commissioned pendant. The design had been evolving in my mind for days. A cascade of copper wire strands suspended from a central hub, each strand holding small pieces of sea glass I'd collected over years of beach walks. When illuminated, the glass would glow with varying intensities of blue and green, while the copper structure would cast delicate shadow patterns. Working in the new space was transformative. The abundant natural light made color and texture more apparent. The generous dimensions allowed me to step back and view the piece from different angles. Most importantly, The psychological effect of being in a proper studio, a space designated solely for creativity, freed something in my approach. I worked with greater confidence, making bolder choices, trusting my instincts. 3 days later, Eliza called about the commission she'd mentioned at Vivian's dinner party. "I've been thinking about our conversation," she said after pleasantries were exchanged. "For the sunroom, I'm envisioning something that plays with both natural and artificial light. Perhaps a piece that looks one way during the day and transforms at night." The challenge intrigued me immediately. "I've been experimenting with materials that interact differently with various light sources," I told her. "Would you be open to a site visit? Seeing the space would help me design something specific to its dimensions and light patterns." "Absolutely," she agreed. "How about Friday morning?" With 2 commissions now in progress and the competition entry submitted, I established a new daily rhythm. Mornings were reserved for handyman appointments, limited now to 3 per day, 3 days a week. Afternoons and evenings were dedicated to studio work. The transition wasn't without financial anxiety, but seeing my bank balance dip a little. Each week was balanced by the steady progress of my creative projects. One Tuesday afternoon, about 2 weeks after establishing the studio, I was deeply focused on the pendant for Julian, when footsteps on the stairs announced a visitor. Vivian appeared at the doorway, accompanied by a tall, distinguished man in his 60s. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but I wanted to introduce you to someone. Alex, this is Robert Kincaid, Director of the Regional Arts Council. Robert, this is Alex Turner, the lighting designer I was telling you about." I set down my tools and wiped my hands before extending one to shake Robert's. "A pleasure to meet you," I said, acutely aware of the work-in-progress state of both the studio and the pendant. Robert's handshake was firm, his gaze direct but kind. "Likewise, Vivian speaks very highly of your work, and she's not easily impressed." Vivian laughed. "I mentioned Alex's innovative approach to lighting design, and Robert expressed interest in seeing your work firsthand. I hope you don't mind the impromptu visit." "Not at all," I assured them, though my heart was racing. The Regional Arts Council was a significant organization, providing grants, exhibition opportunities, and resources to artists throughout the area. Having its director in my studio was unexpected, to say the least. Robert moved through the space slowly, examining the finished pieces I'd displayed on shelves and tables. He asked thoughtful questions about materials, techniques, and inspirations, occasionally making notes in a small book he carried. "These are remarkable," he said eventually, returning to where Vivian and I stood. "Particularly your use of reclaimed materials and the interplay between the structural elements and light patterns. Very distinctive." "Thank you," I said, trying to maintain my composure under such high praise. "I'm especially interested in your background," Robert continued. "Vivian mentioned you're self-taught, coming to this from work as an electrician and handyman." I nodded, explaining briefly how my practical experience had informed my artistic development. Rather than seeming put off by my non-traditional path, Robert appeared increasingly intrigued. "The council is organizing an exhibition for next spring," he said. "Working title is Unexpected Trajectories, featuring artists who've arrived at their practice through unusual routes. Your work would be a perfect fit." My mind struggled to process this new opportunity appearing so soon after Julian's. "I'd be very interested," I managed to say. "Excellent," Robert smiled. "The formal invitation will come later, but consider this a heads up to start thinking about what you might want to include. We'd be looking for 5 to 7 pieces that demonstrate both your technical approach and conceptual development." After he left, I turned to Vivian in amazement. "Did that just happen?" Her expression was pleased, but unsurprised. "I may have strategically mentioned your work when I ran into Robert at a gallery opening last week. Vivian, I don't know how to thank you. Again." She waved away my gratitude. "No thanks necessary. Your work speaks for itself. I'm just making sure the right people hear it." As I returned to the pendant, my mind whirled with new possibilities. From 0 professional opportunities to multiple exhibitions and commissions in the span of a month, the acceleration was dizzying. Yet beneath the excitement ran a current of apprehension. Could I meet these expectations? Produce enough quality work? Navigate this new world of galleries, critics, and collectors? That evening, rather than continuing work as I usually would, I walked to the small park near Vivian's house, needing space to process everything that was happening. Sitting on a bench as the sun set, I called my mother, who lived in Arizona now. "Mom," I said when she answered, "I have some news." I hadn't told her about any of the recent developments, partly because they'd happened so quickly, partly from old habit, keeping my artistic aspirations private, protected from potential disappointment. "What's going on, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice warm with concern. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay," I assured her, and then let the whole story spill out. Vivian's ceiling light, the dinner party, Julian's gallery, the new studio, Robert's visit. As I spoke, I realized how extraordinary it all sounded, this rapid sequence of events that had transformed my trajectory. When I finally paused for breath, my mother was silent for a moment. Then, softly, "Your father would be so proud, Alex. This is what he always saw in you." The simple statement hit me with unexpected force. "You think so?" "I know so," she said firmly. "Remember how he'd save those special materials for you? How he'd show your early designs to anyone who'd look? He believed in your talent long before you did." I swallowed hard, emotions welling. "I wish he could see this." "Oh, honey," she said gently. "I think maybe he orchestrated it. All these years you've kept his business going, honoring his memory. Now it's time for your own path. And suddenly doors are opening everywhere? That's your dad, pulling strings from wherever he is." The thought was comforting, even if I wasn't sure I believed in such cosmic arrangements. But coincidence or destiny, the result was the same. I was finally stepping fully into the creative life I'd always wanted, but never quite believed I deserved. The following week brought the result of the lighting design competition. Honorable mention in the emerging artist category. Not a win, but recognition nonetheless, and valuable exposure in the competition catalog. Julian was pleased when I shared the news, seeing it as additional validation for including my work in his group show. "Collectors like to see that third-party endorsement," he explained during our follow-up meeting, where I presented the completed pendant. "It suggests you're not just one gallery's discovery, but part of a broader artistic conversation." The pendant itself exceeded my expectations. The sea glass elements caught and diffused light in mesmerizing patterns, while the copper structure created both visual interest and practical stability. Julian circled it slowly, examining the craftsmanship. "This is excellent work, Alex," he said finally, "even better than I anticipated. It shows significant development from the pieces you showed me initially." His praise meant more than I expected. Despite Vivian's assurances about my talent, part of me had feared Julian's initial interest might have been primarily a favor to her. This confirmation of independent artistic merit was deeply validating. "The new studio space has made a difference," I told him. "Having room to work properly, with good light and the right equipment, it's transformative." Julian nodded, understanding. Environment shapes output more than many artists realize. Now, let's talk about pricing for the group showpieces. We settled on figures that seemed simultaneously too high, given what I was used to charging for handyman work, and too low, considering the hours of labor and creative energy invested. Julian assured me that as my reputation grew, so would my prices, a long-term investment in building a sustainable career. As I prepared to leave, he mentioned casually, "By the way, Robert Kincaid called me yesterday, asking about your work. I gave you a glowing review, of course." "Thank you," I said, still adjusting to this new reality where established art world figures discussed my work in my absence. "He's considering me for an exhibition next spring." "The Unexpected Trajectories show? That's perfect for you," Julian nodded approval. "Between my group show, that exhibition, and whatever commissions come your way in the meantime, you're building a solid foundation. Just remember to pace yourself. Quality over quantity. Always." His advice echoed in my mind as I drove back to the studio. The opportunities accumulating were exciting but potentially overwhelming. I needed a strategic approach to ensure I could fulfill commitments without compromising creative integrity or burning out. At the studio, I found Vivian sitting by one of the large windows, sketchpad in hand. She occasionally used the space when I wasn't working, finding its light and atmosphere conducive to her own creative process. "How did the meeting with Julian go?" she asked, setting aside her drawing. I recounted our conversation, including the pricing discussion and his mention of Robert's call. It's all happening so fast, I admitted. Part of me is worried I can't keep up. Vivian considered this. It's a valid concern. Creative energy isn't infinite, and the business aspects of an artistic career can be draining. Exactly, I agreed, relieved she understood. I'm afraid of saying yes to everything, then delivering rushed work or missing deadlines. So set boundaries now, she suggested simply. Decide how many commissions you can reasonably handle at once. Establish timelines that allow for both creation and rest. Most importantly, protect your studio time. It's sacred. Her practical approach calmed my anxiety, rather than a chaotic rush of opportunities threatening to overwhelm me. I could see a structured path forward, with thoughtful decisions at each juncture. You make it sound so manageable, I observed. Because it is, with the right mindset, she replied. Remember, you're building a sustainable creative practice, not chasing momentary success. That requires pacing, discernment, and occasional refusal. Saying no doesn't come naturally to me, I confessed. Vivian smiled. It gets easier with practice. Start with the obvious mismatches, projects that don't align with your vision or values. Eventually, you'll develop the confidence to decline, even attractive opportunities that would compromise your core work. Over the next several weeks, I put her advice into practice. When a potential client requested a rushed commission with specific design requirements that didn't interest me, I politely declined rather than compromising my artistic direction. When a local business association invited me to participate in a craft fair alongside hobbyists and mass-produced items, I thanked them, but explained that my work was taking a different direction. Each refusal was difficult, but ultimately freeing, creating space for the work that truly mattered. And rather than drying up opportunities, this selectivity seemed to enhance interest in what I was creating. The pendant for Julian's show was completed ahead of schedule. The commission for Eliza's sunroom, a series of suspended panels that transformed from translucent to illuminated as natural light faded, was progressing well. I'd begun developing concepts for Robert's exhibition, exploring more experimental forms that pushed the boundaries of what lighting could be and do. One afternoon, about a month after establishing the studio, I was sketching ideas when Vivian knocked on the open door. She looked unusually serious. "Do you have a moment?" she asked. Of course, I set aside my work. Everything okay? She sat in the chair opposite my workbench, her hands clasped in her lap. I had a follow-up appointment with my cardiologist yesterday. My stomach tightened. In the whirlwind of recent weeks, I'd almost forgotten about her heart condition. And? The medication is working better than expected, she said, a small smile forming. My numbers are improving, and he's cautiously optimistic about the prognosis. Relief washed over me. Vivian, that's wonderful news. It is, she agreed. But it's also a reminder of something I've been meaning to discuss with you. What's that? She looked around the studio, now fully functional and personalized with my tools, materials, and inspirations covering every surface. This arrangement was meant to be temporary, a launching pad for your independent career. But watching you work here, seeing how the space has come alive, it feels right somehow. I waited, unsure where she was heading. What would you think about a more permanent arrangement? She continued. Not indefinitely, but perhaps a year or two, enough time for you to establish yourself fully before investing in your own space? The offer stunned me. That's incredibly generous, Vivian. It's selfish too, she admitted with a wry smile. I've enjoyed having creative energy in this house again. The place feels more alive with you working upstairs, clients coming and going, ideas being realized in real time. I have loved working here, I said honestly. The space, the light, it's perfect, and having you nearby to bounce ideas off of has been invaluable. Then it's settled. She nodded decisively. We'll draw up a simple agreement, with modest rent that increases as your business grows. Fair to both of us, with clear expectations. As she spoke, I realized something had shifted in our relationship. The initial dynamic, mentor and protege, benefactor and recipient, had evolved into something more balanced. We were now collaborators of sorts, each bringing value to a mutually beneficial arrangement. There's one more thing, Vivian added, reaching into her pocket. This came in the mail yesterday. She handed me an envelope bearing the logo of the Regional Arts Council. Inside was a formal invitation to participate in the Unexpected Trajectories exhibition, along with details about installation dates, promotional materials needed, and an unexpected bonus, a $2,500 stipend to support the creation of new work specifically for the show. This is incredible, I breathed, scanning the letter. The stipend alone would cover materials for several new pieces. It's a significant opportunity, Vivian agreed. Not just the exhibition itself, but the connection to the council's resources and network. As I reread the letter, something struck me. The opening reception is exactly 6 months from the day you asked me to fix your ceiling light. Vivian's eyes widened slightly. Is it really? I hadn't noticed the date. 6 months, I repeated, marveling at the symmetry. From handyman job to featured artist in a regional exhibition. It doesn't seem possible. And yet here we are, she said, gesturing to the studio around us, the evidence of transformation visible in every corner. Because you were ready to hear a question that challenged your assumptions about yourself. At 53, I don't care what people think anymore. Do you? I quoted, smiling at the memory of that pivotal moment. A simple question, Vivian acknowledged. But the right one at the right time can change everything. Looking around the studio, at the finished pieces awaiting delivery to Julian's gallery, the in-progress commission for Eliza, the sketches, for new work that would now be supported by the council's stipend, I felt a profound sense of alignment. Every aspect of my life was now oriented toward creativity, toward authentic expression, toward work that felt meaningful and true. I think I'm getting closer to that freedom you described, I told Vivian. Not completely there yet, but the weight of others' expectations feels lighter every day. It's a journey, not a destination, she replied. We never entirely escape the pull of social validation, but we can choose which voices matter to us. The secret is selecting those voices carefully, people who see us clearly and want our highest good. As she spoke, I thought of the voices that now surrounded me. Julian's professional guidance, Eliza's enthusiastic appreciation, Robert's institutional recognition, Marcus's unwavering friendship, but most significantly, Vivian's perspective, which had cut through years of hesitation and self-doubt to reveal a path forward I hadn't believed possible. Thank you, I said simply, for seeing something in me I couldn't quite see in myself. Her smile was warm, but matter-of-fact. That's the gift we can give each other, isn't it? To reflect back the truth of who someone is, beneath the layers of doubt and compromise. To say, this is what I see in you, and it's magnificent. As evening fell, casting long shadows through the studio windows, we shared a quiet moment of appreciation for the journey undertaken, the opportunities unfolding, and the freedom that comes with living authentically, regardless of what others might think. In that peaceful silence, surrounded by the physical manifestations of creativity finally given room to flourish, I understood the real power of Vivian's question. It wasn't just about defying judgment or embracing authenticity, though these were certainly part of it. The deeper invitation was to recognize how brief and precious life is, how easily we sacrifice our unique gifts at the altar of conformity, and how much richer existence becomes when we finally give ourselves permission to live and create without apology. The transformation of the past 6 months had been extraordinary by any measure, from handyman to artist, from garage tinkerer to gallery-represented designer. But the internal shift was even more profound. I had crossed a threshold from which there was no turning back, into a life aligned with my deepest values and creative vision. And it had all begun with a flickering ceiling light, and a simple, provocative question from a woman who had learned the hard way that life is too short for the prison of others' expectations. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.